There were times I'd be in the grocery store, and even now it makes me emotional, but my mom would buy groceries for me if I couldn't afford them. But I'd stand in the grocery store line and cry because this is my job and I can't provide for the kids.
Yeah.
And that's hard.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining me. My name is Reesa and I'm your host. We are talking to real families about real stories here on The Real Family Eats, where we've got food for thought and thoughtful food. So let's eat. Okay, everyone. So my guest today is the lovely Tanya. Tanya, thank you so much for being willing to chat with us today.
Thanks for having me, Reesa.
Yes, absolutely. I know that you're apprehensive about coming on, so I really do appreciate
It's
you.
a little nerve-wracking. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I know Tanya's story, and I think that a lot of you listeners out there will find a lot of value in some of the things that you've experienced, a lot of families out there too. But before we get there, and for anybody who doesn't know you, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Tanya. I'm a mother of 3. My kids are grown now. My oldest is 28 this year. My youngest is 22. I'm a special education teacher in an elementary school, the one right around the corner from home, because that's where I went back to work when I started this single motherhood journey.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I work in the neighborhood that my kids grew up in, and it's fun.
Yeah, very neat. Okay, so I know you're teaching us a special recipe that you used to use for your kiddo. So tell us what it is and why did you pick this recipe?
This is what we call Schmarn. My in-laws are German, and it was kind of a comfort food recipe.
Okay.
For my husband's family, and my kids just kind of grew up with it when they were young, going to Oma's house, and it was their favorite, and we started making it at home too.
Okay.
The measurements are very loose,
Okay.
to say the least.
So we can flex.
Yeah, and I don't even know if I'm making it correctly. I looked it up yesterday, and it's kind of a peasant food.
Okay.
It was made, created kind of, I guess, when they cook for the royalty, if they cook these giant pancakes and they got torn or they weren't quite perfect, they would break them up and eat them. The servants would eat them.
Okay.
So my kids love it. It's kind of a breakfast for dinner thing.
Okay.
Not a whole lot of nutritional value, which is hard for me, but it's got just enough protein to fill everybody up. And it was a good Friday night. I'm tired. This is what we're having. And the kids were so excited.
Awesome. Well, I'm so excited to learn about it. So walk me through what steps I need to do, and then we'll get started hearing a little bit about your story.
Okay, so first we're going to mix the semolina and the flour and the milk and just kind of stir them up good and let them absorb the milk and kind of get thick before we add the eggs and the cottage cheese.
Sounds good. Okay, I can do that. So while I'm doing this, I know that for most of kind of this thing called parenthood, you kind of had to do a lot of it on your own. And I imagine, especially now kind of, yes, they're grown, but you're still kind of in their lives and still parenting. Yes. Tell me a little bit about what being a single parent was like and kind of some of those struggles that come with it.
The single parenting was a shock for me.
Okay.
I came from a nice, stable family. My ex-husband came from a nice, stable family. It was not a place I ever expected to be.
Yeah.
That being said, I did have my parents backing the whole time. My parents were always there when I needed anything.
Okay.
But, then part of a pride thing is these are my kids. I've got to provide for them. I need to do this as much as I can. Mm-hmm. But it was hard, even with, I feel for those people that do single parenting, men and women on their own, because I relied on my parents a lot.
Yeah.
There were times I'd be in the grocery store, and even now it makes me emotional, but my mom would buy groceries for me if I couldn't afford them. But I'd stand in the grocery store line and cry because this is my job and I can't provide for the kids.
Yeah.
And that's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard to accept that when you don't expect to be there, and I had my degree. I had what should have been a good backup career in teaching. But at the time, the economy and everything was really low. They weren't hiring teachers. They were laying off teachers.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I got really lucky because I did have my teaching credential and my kids were going to school close by home. And I was able to work as a long-term substitute.
Okay.
But I ended up doing that for about 7 years for $100 a day.
Oh, wow.
And so I was doing all the work of a regular teacher for $100 a day.
Wow. And still trying to kind of be there and supporting your 3 kiddos.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Like that was my goal, was to keep the kids' lives as normal as possible. We lived in a nice suburban area. The kids played soccer and, had all these extracurricular activities.
Yeah.
And I wanted to maintain that for them. But yeah, it was hard. I was tired.
Yeah, I imagine so. And I heard you mention kind of that it was important for you to be able to kind of keep some stability for them. Can you talk a little bit more about why was that kind of front of mind goal for you?
Just didn't want the divorce to affect them the way it was affecting me. I didn't feel like any of this was their fault. Yeah. So they should be able to maintain, we tried to stay in the same community and keep the same friendships and things going for them so that, that it didn't affect them so much.
Yeah. You mentioned kind of how it was impacting you. Was that difficult to be able to show up, kind of almost sounds like put on this face for them in with that goal for them while still having your own very real emotions, I imagine?
Yeah, it really was. I wasn't one of those people. I know there's kind of two kinds of people. You get stressed and you can't sleep, and you get stressed and all you want to do is sleep. And that was more me. All I wanted to do was sleep because it went away. And, I'd sleep at night and then drag myself out of bed in the morning against everything my body wanted to do.
Yeah.
And get in the shower and stand there and cry if I needed to or whatever, and get out. And it was time to start the day because I had to put on that happy face for not only the kids at home, but the kids at school. Because the kids at school were relying on me. Yeah. And the parents of those kids, I couldn't let that affect what I was doing at school. And I felt a really big responsibility to those kids too.
I mean, and gosh, to have to then do that solo and kind of, almost compartmentalize what was happening with you.
For sure.
And it sounds like just for your own survival.
Yeah.
In that particular.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, were there things that you're looking at it going, whether it's a self-critique on yourself or on the circumstance that, I feel like there's so many ideas out there of what it's supposed to look like, what parenthood is supposed to look like.
Right.
And it sounds like your journey, your parenthood journey was very different. And I would love to kind of hear more about how you navigated even some of those and what your experience was like.
It was, I don't even know. I was in survival mode. I get up in the morning and play mom and get everybody breakfast and lunch and get them off to school. And the first year I was at the same school with all 3 kids. Okay. So that was kind of a nice transition year. We all went to school together. Yeah. Even though they were a little early and stayed a little late, it was okay. I was really lucky to have really good kids. I didn't have any health issues with them. I didn't have any huge behavior issues or anything. So they were pretty compliant when it came to, I'm sorry, we're staying at school until 5:00 today or sometimes later because I had to do report cards or parent conferences or things like that.
Yeah. All for $100 a day.
For $100 a day.
Oh my
because
goodness.
as a long-term sub, you know, after so many days, we got an extra $20 a day.
Oh my
Even though you're doing,
here you go, all this hard work,
right,
just $20.
Here's an extra $20. All the planning, all the grading, all that. Whereas, you know, a normal sub walks in one day, the plans are done for them. They walk out at the end of the day, check, we did everything on the list.
Yeah.
But as a long-term sub, I used to joke about working for my $1.25 an hour because that's what it felt like a lot of times.
Yeah.
But yeah, I had to do school. I really had to focus on when I was at school, that was my job. And when I was at home, that was my job. And I remember my oldest daughter one night at dinner, I was saying something about my kids, referring to my kids at school. And she was at dinner and she goes, she must have been about 7th grade. She goes, yeah, but Mom, we're your kids. Yeah, you are. But
yeah.
I have lots of kids that I felt responsible for. So it was some long, hard days. And I look back and think, I don't know how I did it because I don't know, looking back.
Yeah. I mean, how do you're taking care of everybody at school, you're taking care of everyone at home. You know, was there any time that you were taken care of, or, you know, I imagine that the toll that can take on a person's mental wellness is really heavy.
Yeah, taking care of myself was not part of the deal, for sure.
Yeah.
I didn't start doing anything for myself until my kids were much older. Probably, you know, when my oldest ones were in college. Actually, I met one of the other moms at my daughter's soccer practice, and she's like, I want to start to get back to running. And she wasn't even talking to me, honestly. And I was like, wait a minute, I want to start running. And so that was what got me out of doing everything for everybody else and doing something for myself. That was the first thing that I started doing for myself.
Wow.
I didn't ever have my hair done. I mean, it was months and months in between haircuts and things like that because I didn't have the money. And if I did have the money, it went to my kids.
Do you find that there was a difference for you once you did start taking, even like you said, just that running time and going out for a run? Did you notice a shift? Was it just kind of still same old, we're surviving?
It took a while.
Okay.
But yeah, there was definitely a shift of, I started to develop my own friendships. I never had time for friends.
Yes.
And so these women I started running with became my friends and somebody to talk to. And I didn't talk to anybody about struggles or anything like that during those years. And I was like, wow, this feels really good to have friends.
Yeah.
But yeah, I had no idea. I
mean, gosh, to like, as you mentioned, not really kind of have anyone to even invent to or, you know, talk to about it, whether they got it or not. It sounds incredibly lonely.
It was. And yeah, I did have my parents, but, you know, I put the parent filter on with them and because I didn't want them to worry about me. So, you know, I'd tell them a little bit of how I was feeling or what the struggles were, but they really had no idea.
Yeah.
And, you know, gradually I came to know more of the people at work that I worked with. The other teachers became friends as well. But it took a while to open up because when I start to open up, I start to get emotional.
Yeah.
It's hard.
It really is. And guess what? Emotions they're a real part of parenting.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. You know, there's all sorts of things. And that's part of the reason why it's okay to cry, because crying is a real thing. It's a real part of our journey. I don't know how many times I've heard parents say that, you know, my kids cry and I just sit there and I cry with them because what are you going to do?
What do you do?
There's nothing else.
I always tried to hide it from my kids. You know, I'm standing at the sink with my back turned. Mom, are you crying? No, I'm fine. Just tired. And so I hid it from everybody.
Wow. Gosh.
I guess that's why it's all still there.
But the fact that, you know, it sounds like for you kind of the narrative and your survival mode was that I did need to hide this in order to be able to kind of make it through.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's all we can do. That's all that we have the capacity to do in that moment.
It really was. Yeah, it really was.
Yeah.
Because I felt like if I let myself go, I was never coming back. I was never going to be able to come back from that.
Yeah. And to carry that load all on your own, on top of everything else that you were carrying.
Yeah. And I told you before, and I feel like I was a really lucky single mom. You know, I had my degree to fall back on. I had my parents to catch me when I was drowning, kind of thing. So I know a lot of single moms don't have that. Single parents don't have that.
Yeah.
And I did, and I feel really lucky for that. And it was still so hard.
Wow. Goodness. Okay. I want to hear more about this. Where we go from now.
Okay. So, just mix up the eggs, break up the eggs a little bit, mix that and the cottage cheese in there. We might need a little more milk. It looks a little sticky.
Okay. So we want it a little bit more.
It's kind of like, it's supposed to be sort of like thick pancake batter.
Okay. I can grab some more milk on that.
This might loosen it up enough. We don't.
Okay. So should I loosen first and then we'll see?
Yep.
Okay. So let's do that. Oh. Come over here.
Yeah, you can break up it. And it's not a real recipe. It's just, we'll throw it in and see how it looks.
Sounds good. I love it. And sometimes that's what you got to do as a parent.
Right.
You know, you don't have time to sit there and make a 7-course meal.
Exactly.
And so we're whipping something together.
And that's where this came into. It was like I usually pretty much always had some eggs, some milk, some flour, a little bit of cottage cheese to throw in.
Okay. So I know that you're talking kind of all the work that you were doing to be there for your kiddos, both in the classroom and at home, and show up for them despite kind of everything that you were dealing with on the back end of things that nobody was seeing. I'm curious, were there times that you received messages from other folks, whether they were unsolicited opinions or judgments just about life and, what it was quote unquote supposed to be like and what you should be doing?
I don't think it was other people's comments. I think it was all me putting that on myself.
Okay. Can you tell me more?
I had these expectations for my life that it wasn't living up to. I had this vision of I was going to have this perfect textbook, raising my kids. I was a stay-at-home mom. I was really lucky to, have been able to stay home for that time. And I just looking around, like I said, this nice little suburban town, this is what my life should be like. And I'm struggling and everybody else's lives look easy compared to mine.
Yeah.
So it was on me, and I'm my own worst critic.
Aren't we all?
Always. Yeah. So, and I think a lot of that was if I had lightened up on myself a little bit and been able to let some things go. But my house has to be clean and the laundry has to be done and I have to cook these meals and I'm struggling to keep it all together, but I wanted the kids to be in a normal house, what I considered to be a normal household.
Was there a narrative there that for you or a fear that if it wasn't in, a quote unquote normal household, that it was going to somehow, impact them in a negative way that kind of kept you going in that sense?
Definitely. Yep.
Yeah. What was that narrative for you? Like, what was your brain trying to convince you was going to happen?
I didn't want them to be bullied at school.
Okay.
That at one point they had been given a hard time a little bit about their clothes and their shoes and, you wear the same pair of shoes every day when other kids had, a variety of shoes to choose from. In the mornings, my kids got one pair of shoes every 6 months.
Yeah.
Because that's what I could afford. So, I was worried for them. I didn't want them to be targeted for some reason.
Yeah. Do you think now that they are more grown up, do you look back and, or maybe they even share some insight that they, it wasn't maybe all that you were fearful it was going to be?
Now they're more open with me. They didn't tell me a lot of the things that happened or things that kids said back then.
Okay.
I think they were trying to protect me.
Oh, wow.
And now they're like, oh yeah, I remember in third grade, there was this friend I had and she was really mean to me. I'm like, well, why didn't you tell me? But, they didn't want to upset me, I think, because they saw how I was struggling, even though I tried to hide it.
Yeah.
So,
man, kids are more intuitive, more aware than I feel like we give them credit for.
They really are.
Yeah.
They really are.
Yeah. Yep. Do you find, that there was kind of any moments where you were able to kind of step back and take a look at things and make some adjustments in that way? Or was it not until, much later that as you mentioned, you found your group, you started to kind of open up in that way?
Yeah, no, I think it was not until later. I was very much in a tunnel of just keep it together for a long time.
Yeah. I know you mentioned, some of the privilege in that you had some of the support of your family. Were there struggles or messages that you might have gotten from them as well? Although, supportive, it sounds like, I know you said that they grew up in a very different way. Like their household maybe looked a little bit different than yours. And I'm curious, like, was there challenges that you were facing just on the parent side of things and being the kiddo?
I think my parents were really, my mom was hard on me, as far as not hard on me in a negative way, but hard on me as this is what you need to do. And I might have been reluctant to follow through on some things or apply for certain jobs or, that kind of thing. My mom, okay. And she had always been like that, which at the time I was like, all right, Mom, yes, I will finish my teaching credential, even though I'm 7 months pregnant. But she was on me.
Oh, wow.
The entire time, like, you need to finish this. And I never thought I'd need it. Mom, I'm not going to need it. Looking back, very thankful that she was on me.
Yeah. Can you tell me more? Like, is that a mentality that she's passed down, or where did that come from? Kind of that drive that, like you said, you're 7 months pregnant and, saying, hey, go back, get your, teaching credentials.
Yeah. I think that she, neither one of my parents grew up especially wealthy at all. My mom was the daughter of migrant farm workers that came out from Oklahoma back in the day, and they were very poor when she was young. And she was the first in her family to go to college and that kind of thing. So I think that that was ingrained in her. Mm-hmm. You need to finish this. This is who we have to be now. We don't want to go backwards.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. So
are those ideas that you've kind of held on to?
A little bit.
Yeah.
Like I really tried not to push my kids, meaning, like college isn't mandatory, because I really don't think college is for everybody and you don't have to go to college to be successful, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But just pushing them to work hard and to choose something and go for it, and don't be afraid to fail, or the only failure is just not trying at all, kind of thing.
Okay. I love that idea, and even normalizing, like you said, that college is not for everyone. I feel like there's so many other messages out there that,
so many,
in order to succeed, it has to look like A, B, C. And that's part of, I think, the struggle. And what we're trying to do here is the fact that everybody's parenting journey looks a little bit different. And just as everybody's personal lives look a little bit different, and kind of what they do and how they find success. Yeah. And it doesn't always mean that you have to do everything the exact same way as the person sitting next to you.
Right. And even in the same family, because all three of my kids, yes, they ended up all going to college and getting degrees. They're following very different paths. It was hard for me to accept that, after two very successful older sisters, my son was like, no, I'm not going to college. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm like, that's fine, but you can't just sit on the couch and play Xbox. So you got to figure something out.
Something needs to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
okay. Are we doing
mix that in? Yeah.
Is this a good consistency?
It looks pretty good.
Okay. All right. So now kind of as you're looking back, are there, I know you mentioned kind of a little bit, you were doing all of this before there were kind of all the resources.
Yeah. This was all pre-internet kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I didn't have that to fall back on for sure.
How were there any other supports outside of family that you found were really helpful, or that you kind of went to be able to support you kind of on parenthood journeys?
The couple of times I would go to Children and Family Services or anything like that, I really didn't feel like they were helpful for me because I was in that middle ground space. I wasn't totally poor and destitute. I had a place to live. I had a roof over my head. I had a little bit of money coming in. And if you're in that middle ground, you're out of luck.
Forgotten about?
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like going to college. You're either able to pay for it outright or you qualify for financial aid. But those people in the middle ground are the ones that really suffer and have to take on all the student debt because there's not a lot of support. That's where I found myself.
Wow. I imagine, that's difficult to be, like you said, in that middle ground where there's not a whole lot of services. There's not a whole lot of, financial aids or programs that are available because it's too much. You make too much to be of need. And you don't make enough to really kind of thrive in that. And so to be in that, goodness, that's gotta be really difficult.
Well, and it was hard to kind of find resources without, now we have the internet. You just go and search. And I didn't even know where to start, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I didn't have a whole lot of time to dedicate to it.
That's fair. You had a lot on your plate. Okay, so what are we doing?
Right, a little bit of oil in the pan.
Perfect. Am I just frying them up like pancakes?
You're just going to pour it all in there into one big thing. Yep.
Really?
Yep.
Okay.
And so it kind of will brown on the bottom, and you might need a little more oil than less.
Okay.
Because as it cooks on the bottom and it looks like one giant pancake, but instead of flipping it at that point, you're just going to start breaking it up into chunks.
Okay.
And stirring it around and letting it cook.
Okay.
It's not a pretty meal. Chunky pancakes.
Yeah. Very cool. And so how would you normally serve these? Just by themselves?
So what I would do is fry it all up, get it all chunky, and then everybody gets a plate.
Okay.
And you get however much Schmarn you would like to have. We sprinkled it with sugar.
Okay.
Just regular sugar. A lot of the recipes I found online, it's very much a family dish. And so some people add raisins to it, and some people, it's very different depending on the recipe you find.
Okay.
But we served it with a sprinkling of sugar and canned fruit.
Canned fruit. Okay.
Yep. My kid's favorite was canned pears and canned peaches. It would be delicious with a jelly or something poured over, kind of melted and poured over. Fresh fruit would be fine. We just like the juice from the canned fruit.
Yeah.
Kind of pour over it. It doubled as the syrup.
And it sounds like, all things considered, it was fairly economical.
Yeah.
As far as the recipe.
Definitely.
Did you find other things that for you, that was your go-to because of just that? We didn't have a whole ton. And so these were some of your go-to recipes?
Yeah, there's not necessarily recipes, but there is what we call the food box in town.
Okay.
The Western Eagle Foundation had a store in town, and we'd go there every couple of weeks, and I think it was $25 for a box of fruit, and you get fresh fruits and vegetables and some restaurant leftovers, kind of prepackaged.
Okay.
We'd call it mystery sauce. Sometimes it was just a big plastic package of something white and creamy, so you never knew if it was gravy or cream of mushroom soup or what it was.
Okay, so you just kind of
it became a game. You know, we pull it out and say, all right, what are we having for dinner? What do you think it is? What do you think it is? So my kids were great sports about it. And that was a lot of times that's what we ate. But that also came with like little bags of chips that I could never afford, and they were so excited to have. Or, you know, things of chocolate milk that were on the verge of expiration, but that meant we had to drink it all right away, and we had to drink a gallon of chocolate milk in the next 2 days, and they were all about it.
I was about to say, it sounds like any kid's dream challenge. You want me to drink all this chocolate milk?
And, you know, I really tried to stay on the healthier side with stuff, but, you know, you can only do so much with chocolate milk. You got to drink it.
Yeah. Was there a specific reason why staying on the healthier side was something that was important to you? I mean, outside of just quote unquote healthier, because I know that can be a real challenge for folks that maybe don't have an arm and a leg to be able to spend on groceries.
Right.
Because, you know, the healthier food seems to cost the most.
Truly. And yeah, that was one of the ways I was able to try to stay healthier, because it's just always been important to me. I was raised on healthy food, and it was important to my parents. And I just felt like I didn't want my kids to be junk food kids.
Yeah. Was that again like a narrative in your head? If they were junk food kids?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. What was going on there?
I don't know. I guess part of that being that middle class family meant I had to cook dinner, and we weren't going to rely on fast and easy to feed us. But it was hard.
Yeah.
It was hard to stay on that path.
And so much to live up to. Like if that's the idea, right? That it not only do I need to work all day because I have to provide, there's no one else to provide, it's just me.
Right.
And then I have to be present at home for all the things that are included, cooking, cleaning, etc. But that the cooking needed to be a specific way, that I had to cook and that I had to cook healthy food. Right. And kind of having that expectation. I mean, that's a really big ask to try to live up to, for just in general, not counting everything else.
I made my own life really miserable.
But again, I'm so curious about kind of what's going on, because I imagine you're not alone in that idea that this is what it's supposed to look like.
Well, and this is my job. I chose to have these children. They're my responsibility. This is part of my job as the parent, is to feed them and provide for them these certain things.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it sounds exhausting to live
like I said, I look back and think, I'm not quite sure how I survived that. I do distinctly remember times, and the kids were probably really little, just coming home and it being 7:30, 8 o'clock, and thinking, I can't, I got to go to bed.
Yeah.
I'm just exhausted. And like I said before, I was really lucky to have kids that were like, okay, Mom, that's all right. You can go to bed. And they just got themselves to bed on Friday night when I just couldn't do it anymore.
If you had a time machine and you were able to kind of go back, are there any insights that you would offer yourselves, or words that you would tell yourself kind of differently now looking back at it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. There were so many things that I spent time on hand washing dishes that I felt needed to be hand washed to protect them, their beauty, or, just because they were expensive, or it's in my view, expensive. My mom always hand washed all the coffee cups that had writing and stuff on them, because if you put them in the dishwasher, they wore off. And I spent time hand washing things that, like, really, why? Or ironing things, like, really, it didn't need to be ironed. So many things I've learned to let go now.
Yeah.
But back then I thought, oh, this is important. The house doesn't need to be spotless. The kids don't have to have ironed clothes and perfect hair every day, and those kinds of things. One of the teachers I taught with, she gave me a hard time for a long time. I was in the hallway before school one morning. I had my son bent over the sink in the hallway wetting his hair down.
Oh my goodness.
Because I'd forgotten to do it in the morning before. I was like, you can't go to school like that. Look at your hair. And in the hallway trying to smooth his hair down. I was like, really, who cares?
Yeah.
Plenty of kids go to school with their hair crazy and look, they're just fine.
Can you talk a little bit more about that? Who cares? Because I think that that's something I hear so much, that yes, maybe on the outside you're like, who cares? Oh, it'll be okay. But yet it's still such a hard one for parents to let go of.
It is. And it takes a lot of self-talk and a lot of reflection on what's really important here. So many Disney movies, my kids are like, oh, Mom, remember this movie? I don't remember, because they were watching the movie in the evening, and I, instead of sitting on the couch with them and enjoying the movie, I was trying to clean and mowing the yard in the dark.
Oh my goodness.
Who cares? So the yard's a little long. It's okay.
Yeah. Do you feel like you missed out on some things?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like what?
Just that bonding time, the downtime with the kids, just to relax and have fun and play games. We never did that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I imagine, even having the wherewithal to be able to sit down, like you said, and enjoy those games, it's really hard to access when you have so much on your mind already. And like you said, it sounds like didn't really have an outlet.
Right.
And so that's just all up there, taking up kind of every nook and cranny in your brain.
It does.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does.
Wow. Okay. So
yeah, it looks like you can, at any point, you can kind of lift up the edge and see how it's doing on the bottom.
Okay. Oh yeah. Puffing up there.
Yep.
Okay.
So you can start to kind of break it up, and there's no real, you can't mess it up. It is what it is. You just start chunking it out.
You give me a challenge, I'm going to accept it.
You don't want the chunks to be terribly small, because then you just kind of have to scoop them.
Okay.
But, chunks.
Okay.
You just start breaking it up and letting it fry a little bit. And you break it up a little more and let it fry.
Okay.
You have a nice non-stick pan, so you shouldn't need any more oil.
I want to start.
There were times when I was like, oh, it's going to start sticking, and just add a little oil underneath. But yeah, you just want to kind of brown it up.
Okay.
It's almost like frying a hamburger or something.
Yeah. So once I break it up, am I flipping it then so that all sides are getting?
Yeah, you just stir it up, because after it's chunked up,
okay,
you just end up stirring it.
Gotcha.
Like I said, very much like frying hamburger.
So I'm curious, kind of more along your lines of your journey and kind of parenthood. Were there aspects, if you were to kind of tell a young single parent now, that you would kind of offer, whether that's just insights that you've developed on your own, or any resources? I know you work in education, so I imagine there's some insights that you might have there for anybody who's kind of listening, that you could offer, you would say to them, as someone who might have a journey that looks a little bit like yours.
Yeah. I guess just don't be too proud to take the help when people offer it. I kind of had that, no, I can do this attitude, and people are willing to help. Take the help. the advice, you can take what fits your situation or what the advice you like and let the other stuff go. Don't miss out on those times that you have to spend a little quiet time with your kids. I didn't take my kids to the park. I always felt like I've got chores at home. I don't have time to go to the park.
Yeah.
And part of that, my kids have a really good work ethic. And I'm grateful for that. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's part of the, we've got things to do at home. We've got laundry to do. I need you guys to help me. There was one man in my neighborhood that always seemed to walk by with his dog or his kids or whatever when we were out front doing the yard. But it was very much, as the kids got older, it was a group effort. We'd get outside to do the yard, and one kid would mow and one kid would weed eat and one kid would use the blower and I would pull weeds or whatever. And we learned to work together really well to get the jobs done.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful for that, because I think they did learn what it takes to get by and get everything done.
So it sounds like there were, even though maybe it wasn't your kind of ideal picture, that you had in your mind of what it was going to look like, that it still sounds like your kiddos are thriving. They've learned a lot of skills that sound like maybe come into use now.
They turned out okay. I really am so thankful that, I didn't completely ruin them, but they did. They turned out okay. And they all have good memories of growing up. I don't hear a lot of negatives. Every once in a while, it's, remember that time, Mom, when you were really mad because we...
Who doesn't, though, have one of those stories? Do you think that hearing that, the fact that there isn't more kind of quote-unquote negative memories that they have, does that surprise you at all?
It kind of does.
Yeah.
Because from where I sat, I felt like it was all negative.
Really?
And they don't see it that way, and I'm thankful for that.
Do you believe it?
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're pretty honest with me now about, these were the good times, these were the bad times, kind of thing. I don't know if I just did a really good job hiding, the really hard things. Tried to mediate that.
Okay. And how did you do that? Like what does that look like?
With the money situation, it's like, we don't have a lot of money, we can't afford that, whatever. And showing them that I have to work a whole day to pay the electric bill every month. I have to work a whole day to pay, those kinds of things. Being open with them about some of those things. Okay. Whereas, we don't have the money for that this month. Kind of trying to hide that a little more. They all have a really good money sense. How much things cost, that kind of. So.
And, I heard you mention kind of all of the skills that they have and that they turned out good and, that they were pretty helpful. That was also kind of your doing. I mean, I imagine that they weren't just born that way, unless your kids were kind of magical in that they were born with all of these skills ahead of time.
I was pretty hard on them. Looking back, I think I was pretty hard on them. Expecting, these are the chores that need to be done. This is the behavior I expect. This is, grades, homework, all of those things.
Yeah.
But again, and it's, as any kind of parent knows, it's hard to find the middle ground. How strict do you need to be? How lenient? Where do you need to buckle down a little more? Yeah. I had those same struggles. But I had to be good guy and bad guy, and I think I leaned toward bad guy a little more often. So
was that again coming from that narrative? I need to tackle this. I need to nip it now because there's no one else to do it?
Because there's nobody else.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Was that hard?
It was. Yeah. I at one point, my daughter's like, Mom, why do you say no all the time? And I was like, yeah, I do, don't I? I always say no. it was easier to come back from a no and say yes than a yes to then say no.
Mm-hmm.
So my gut answer was always no. And then I'd have time to think about it a little bit. And it's like, but why not?
Yeah.
Okay. And that came with learning to let things go.
Mm. And when you did say yes, did you find that it was maybe, as bad as you thought it was going to be, or, whatever your brain was trying to convince you of?
Not. It's never as bad as, a lot of times it was just a time issue.
Yeah.
No, we don't have time to go swimming because whatever.
Yeah.
So-and-so has soccer practice, and then we have a baseball game, and then we have, and I created all of that myself because I was wanting them to stay involved in all of these things, but it made my life extra chaotic for sure.
I imagine so.
Dropping this one off. Okay, this practice starts at this time and this practice starts at that time. And so I'll drop this kid off at that practice, and then I'll go over and drop that kid off at that practice on the other side of town.
Yeah.
And then I think I can make it back here to pick this kid up. And then what are we going to do for dinner? So.
Yeah. And again, you don't have a partner to tag in.
Right.
It's
just me.
Yeah. Goodness.
Yeah. It would have been a lot easier to just not let them play those things. Mm-hmm. But that was one of the things I felt like was important.
Yeah. And do you think, like, looking back, you would have maybe given yourself a little bit of grace? Like, maybe they don't have to do every single sport, or,
I really did limit it.
Did you?
Yeah. They each got one sport to play at any given time.
Okay.
Or one activity to be involved in. It may or may not have been a sport, but, I could only manage one thing per child
mm-hmm.
at a time.
Yeah. And see, I think that there are, I've heard parents that they do everything and anything. They're, 5 different mm-hmm. sports because right. there is that fear, that there is that narrative. Like, if I'm not putting them in these things, they're going to lose out, or right. they're not going to be socialized, or whatever that narrative right. is. But it sounds like even for you, being able to kind of set that limit and that boundary of, I want you to do stuff that's important to me. Mm-hmm. At the same time, I only have the capacity. Even now, it sounds like extending you far beyond your capacity. But nonetheless, that it was one sport and that, or one activity even, and mm-hmm. that there was still value in that right. they weren't, it sounds like, not losing out or any less than
right.
people.
Yeah.
Because they weren't doing
and all of these parents, oh, well, my kid's on the scholarship track and they're going to play college soccer, college baseball, this, that, and the other thing. And I was like, yeah, my kids, we can't afford the travel teams and we can't afford mm-hmm. the private pitching coaches. And I really had to accept that was not a track my kids were going to be on.
Yeah.
And it was okay.
Hmm. And yet, for those that don't know, I mean, they're doing so good. They are rock stars.
I don't know if I go that. I mean, my oldest daughter has her doctorate.
Yes.
She's an occupational therapist at one of the big hospitals in Portland. My middle daughter has a degree in math, mm-hmm. and my son has an automotive technology degree, but he's got a great job in Chicago. And, I really encouraged my kids to take the opportunity. I was lucky. I still made little enough when they went to college that they qualified for the low-income college programs. So both girls went to college and paid virtually nothing but room and board, books, but tuition was paid.
Okay.
And I encouraged them to go and do and find some place that they wanted to go while they still had home to fall back on.
Why was that important?
I felt like they needed to learn to be independent.
Yeah.
I didn't want them to, run home on the weekends because it was easy.
Mm-hmm.
There's my mother coming out.
I was just about to say, it sounds so familiar.
Yeah, right. Yep. Go be independent while I got your back.
Yeah, but go be independent. I'm here if you need me.
Exactly.
I want to give you skills to be able to not need me.
Right.
and
Yep.
and to be able to do it on your own.
And to have that confidence, because that was the confidence that I didn't have when I started this journey.
Yeah.
I never thought I'd have to do it on my own. I didn't think I could.
Yeah.
And it took me a lot of years to figure out, wow, look at me. I really
You
can
did
do this.
You did it.
So.
And it sounds like that not only did you do it for your kiddos, but you showed up for so many other people's kids.
I hope so. I hope so.
You're still doing it.
Yeah. I do have one of my girls from second grade who she came to school every day and cried. Every single day she cried. She just wanted to go home and be with her mom. And so I, talked to her mom and we negotiated, okay, I'll be your school mom. She can be your home mom. And when she graduated from high school a couple of years ago, she came back and said, I'm going to be a teacher because of you. And I'll never forget that you were there for me when I just wanted to be home with my mom.
Wow.
So
that sounds so very special.
It really was, because she was in my class when I couldn't see past the end of the day some days.
Yeah.
So.
And to know that, gosh, you were able to do that and show up in those ways despite everything, despite all of the challenges that were trying to knock you down, and your own inner critic that, as you mentioned, is super strong, that you found your way through it, through the challenges, and showed up and touched so many lives, even outside of your own kids. That's really neat. And that's really special.
You.
And that's why you're so awesome, Tanya.
Sweet. Thanks.
Still showing up, even for my kiddos. My kids absolutely love you. And so I can only imagine all the kids that are just
I really had
thriving.
to learn to be present where I was.
Yeah.
I can't think about how I'm going to get my own kids to practice at 10 a.m. when I'm trying to teach math. 10 a.m., it's math time. I have to be there and teach math and not worry about what's going to happen this weekend or at the end of the day or dinner time.
Mm-hmm.
And vice versa, when I get home, I couldn't worry about what I was going to teach or whether the papers were going to get graded or any of that. And I'm fixing dinner. I had to focus on fixing dinner.
Yeah.
And that it was a hard lesson to learn, because I was constantly trying to plan and wrap my arms around everything that needed to be done.
Mm-hmm.
But you can only do so much at a time.
Yeah. And it sounds like almost like a slowing down of needing to kind of slow down.
Yeah, for sure.
Which can be really difficult for parents to allow themselves that permission to slow down, because there is always so much on our plates.
There's always something to do.
Right? Some fire is burning that you have to put out, and you have to figure out how to do it while, showing up for all these other fires that are also simultaneously kind of going off.
That looks beautiful.
Is this what
that's what you were going for.
Okay. So am I ready? You're done. Am I done?
Yep. When it's just kind of dry and crispy, you're done.
Okay. And then we would put whatever we want with it.
How much ever you want on your plate. Sprinkle it with a little sugar to sweeten it up. I saw some recipes put sugar in the mix.
Okay.
We just never did. We just sprinkled it on top because the kids were really excited about being able to sprinkle sugar on something. That was a real treat.
Yeah. And I imagine then you could also even kind of do it, serve yourself, put your own toppings.
Yep.
Which, kids love, right? To be able to feel that independence of, I'm making my own food. Yep. Here's what it looks like. So here's our lovely food. There we go.
It's not real pretty.
Hey, it
was dinner.
It's going to get people fed. Yep. And that's sometimes what you got to do.
That's right. Yep.
Well, Tanya, thank you so much for being willing to chat with us and teach us this lovely recipe. I know my kiddos are excited to try it with their own toppings. And being willing to share your story. I know that it's not always something that people like to talk about or willing to talk about, because it doesn't fit the norm and kind of what it's supposed to look like.
Yeah.
But I think that's just it, is that there are so many people out there whose stories don't fit the box.
Right.
and it feels incredibly lonely because you're looking around, even now with social media, right? Being able to look at it. And it sounds like even for you, going to the grocery store, going to school and seeing all these other families and how on the surface, that's what it looks like, is it looks like they're fitting into this box. So why can't I?
Right.
And hopefully I'll allow people the opportunity to know that there's actually a lot more people not fitting into the box than we think they are.
So true. So true.
So thank you so much. I really appreciate you.
You're welcome.
Not just in my life, but willing to come in and share that with us and all of our listeners.
Thanks for having me.
Yes. All right, folks, thanks so much, and we'll see you next time. If you or anyone that you know is struggling with any of the topics that we discussed in today's episode, make sure to check out our show notes for support and resources. You can get help. Thanks again for joining us on today's episode of The Real Family Eats. If you're a parent ready to share your real-life parenting story, make sure to reach out to us in our website found in the show notes. And that goes for today's recipe, social medias, support, and resources. All of that can be found in our show notes. So make sure to check them out. And make sure to follow, like, share, subscribe, and stay up to date on all things The Real Family Eats. I hope you'll join us next time for more food for thought and thoughtful food. Enjoy your eats.